Good morning, everybody. Wednesday, November 1st, the calendar has turned over and we're officially into the second half of the NFL regular season. As always, with these Wednesday morning live streams, we will look at each and every game on the Week 9 board. We'll discuss sides, totals, props, and give you any sort of relevant information that you can use towards making decisions and bets on Thursday, Sunday, and Monday ahead. You can use the timestamps. If you're watching after this video has already aired within the timeline, you can slide through to get to the game that you want to watch. You can jump back and forth. We've been getting more and more views each week. Last week, almost 6,000 unique viewers joined the show. So a lot of great information coming through. For everybody I see this morning joining in the live chat, as always, get those questions into the live chat. If you're watching on the YouTube app, really helps the show go along, really helps me give you some specific value to questions that you might have. And of course, in the comments below, this has been fantastic. Last week, there were about 40. Let's see that number continue to tick up. So if you're watching this after the video has aired, in the comments below, leave your questions between now and Sunday. Lots of things change in the NFL, as we know. Happy to answer any questions that you might have as we go. So if you leave them in the comments down below, I can answer them, get you the answer through text or through a YouTube short. Lots of fun for me to do. Helps the channel as well. Let's say good morning to a lot of folks here in the channel already. Jay Nava coming in with some hot quarterback opinions. Mariota is better than Ritter. We'll talk about all of that in a minute. Garrett Stone back for another show. The Panthers well is wide open, Garrett. We'll keep on going with that one for the next couple of weeks on those sides and props. We see Jay Karma. Good morning, Adam. Season already halfway over. Week 17 is no longer the end point. Week 18 is now in the schedule. So we're officially at the halfway point. And of course, R. Bates, enjoyed your chat with Matt yesterday about the books. Do I need to read the earlier book first, or might there even be an advantage of some sort just starting with the more recent book? If you missed the live stream yesterday, that's on the channel. It's also in the link down below. Talked with Matthew Davidow. He gave his thoughts on who the best team in the NFL is, best in the AFC, best in the NFC, overrated, underrated. One of the best minds when it comes to NFL betting anywhere, one of the most respected bettors that there is as well, a very respected modeler and odds maker too in his own right. Highly recommend watching that. There's about 20 minutes on the NFL so far to date as a season reset. And then we got into his new book, Interception, which he wrote with Ed Miller. That was about a 35-minute conversation. Perfect if you're just kind of the everyday bettor, betting maybe a couple $100 at games. You like getting into props. You like in play. You like even maybe getting into some SGPs on the side as well for trying for some big wins. Got his thoughts on a lot of things. He's brilliant. And so I highly recommend checking that out here on the channel as well. Of course, after the live stream, stick with me here as we talk through each of the games. All right. Let's get to it as the questions keep coming in. Thanks, Ron, Thomas, James, Gerard, James as well. Another one. Lots of James in the chat. Joe as well back. Same thing with Michael. As always, we will start with my favorite spot. Overrated, underrated. This has been a lot of fun the last couple of weeks. We'll go to Unpredictable this week as we pull up the teams 1 to 32 in their market ratings. DVOA a little bit wonky this week, so we'll look at just pure market ratings overall. So as always, what we do here, when you're looking at these teams on your screen, if you've got the phone turned sideways, let me know as you're looking at this, which teams to you most overrated, which teams most underrated. The last couple of weeks, we've been overrated on the Rams as they fall back to earth. Obviously underrated on the Bengals was a popular choice last week as you're looking at it. As I look at it this week, things are kind of settling into place a little bit. Something that jumps out immediately to me is that Houston got bumped up last week 20 in the loss, now up to 16th this week, despite the loss. That was an interesting move, I think. I would say underrated-wise, Atlanta at 17. I don't think there's a team that has underperformed more relative to what they can be or to their schedule as well. So Atlanta at 17 stands out to me a little bit in terms of the underrated. In terms of the overrated, a little bit more difficult this week as we start to see things really sort of settle into place overall. But I would say, although it may never be realized within the schedule, the Saints at 14, as well as the Steelers at 15, kind of stand out to me. However, this week for Pittsburgh may be the exception. So let's see how far those can go. But this is actually a week where things are pretty well settled in market rating wise. And we look at the bottom of this specifically, if you go like teams 26 to 32, and you're looking for some signs of life, you've got a lot of teams with a lot of question marks at key positions, coaching, personnel. There's just a lot of issues when you're thinking about teams like the Raiders. What are they going to look like now? What are the Vikings going to end up doing with the quarterback situation? What is Arizona going to be when Murray comes back? How much are they going to push him with the season already out of hand? When will Justin Fields be back? Then you have Carolina, which defensive injuries aplenty. However, from the offensive coaching side, although it wasn't explosive, it wasn't a big breakthrough last week, just the way that the team handled it with the comeback drive, the post-game stuff, just seemed really, really good around Carolina. When you see in the far right column that strength of schedule, 11th most difficult so far this season, 25th in terms of difficulty the rest of the season. So a big step back as well. So some interesting teams there in the market. Let's look here. Carolina underrated, Tony Jones. I would agree with that, especially when you're looking at those market prices, having them 32. Gerard Morris says Seahawks love here, Adam. Go Hawks. Seahawks fan obviously is Gerard. Seattle with that defense that continues to get better, but the schedule also is really going to test them in weeks to come, beginning with this week as they get Lamar on the road. Seeing Bengals overrated. That is an interesting take because they've been one of the most popular underrated teams going so far. We talked yesterday with Matthew Navidow. He was saying he thinks right up there with Philadelphia. They're the best team in the NFL. Jay Carmen, Niners overrated. That's an interesting look for sure when you think that the depth that they have, a tongue twister to get that out, very thin everywhere across the roster. And we're really starting to see that show through when they're losing some of these top-line talent guys. There's a big drop-off. Left side of the offensive line without Trent Williams has killed that run game going that direction. Some of the stuff on the defensive side with Steve Wilkes really getting criticized, that's big too. Danny says the Chargers are overrated. Interesting take for sure. James says Chargers are a little high too, in agreement with that as well. I'm curious with teams like the Packers and Houston. I get that Houston sentiment, maybe closer to 21, 22 than they are 16. I can see that for sure. But like, I'm curious with a team like the Packers, if we go back and look at it, Green Bay is 21. How much lower do you want to put them? Are you putting them in the same category as Washington, Minnesota, Las Vegas, in that range with all those issues those teams have? I can see it. I can see the case for that. But it's just, there's not a lot of drop to go. Same thing, James, like, okay, Minnesota is, we go back and we look at where they are. Minnesota's already down at 27. So like, to say they're overrated is a bit tough because they only have 6 spots to fall if you're really going to drop them all the way. So that's maybe a tough one to say overrated overall for that one, James. Let's see, a lot more comments. John says too big a drop for Minnesota. He's on the opposite side. Interesting for sure. Buffalo overrated. Carolina from Chase again. I'm in agreement with that. New offensive coordinator looked good with the motion. He's working it out. We'll see. It wasn't a big breakthrough. We'll get to Carolina in a second. Grayson says Titans underrated. I know why you're saying that with the Will Levis. We'll get to that in a second as well. Lots of comments in on the live chat, guys. If you want to give the video a thumbs up, would very much appreciate it. Also hit the subscribe button. I'll tell you why you should hit the subscribe button before we get to the games. College basketball release shows begin next Monday morning. Looks like 9 a.m. Pacific time will be the first release show of the season. Many of you would have followed along for the release shows last season, but if you hit the subscribe button and you hit the bell for the notifications, they'll get sent to your phone. You'll get the release shows. November college basketball from Red Angle Sports is as good as it gets. And I obviously work with the guys, part of the team, but I'm saying this kind of unbiased because college basketball is something that they have a 2-decade track record for. So there'll be free picks given out here on the YouTube channel. We'll do 1, maybe 2 release shows per week going forward, but the first one will be on Monday. Maybe we'll squeak another extra one in for the opening week. If you have the subscribe button on, you'll get the notification for when that show goes live. However, I have to also bring up something that's very important as we get going forward. We have now on the order page the starter service for college basketball. And so this will begin on Monday as well. Last week talked about the flagship service. For some people who are watching the stream, you might be looking at the flagship and you're saying, that's a big commitment for what I do as a bettor. We now have the starter service available on raspicks.com/order. It is 25 plays for $245. This is targeting anybody in that $200 per game range. If that's something that you're doing, this is something that you really need to consider. If the flagship works for you, I couldn't recommend trying it out more, because when you think about November, Ed Golden, boss at Right Angle Sports, went on Circles Off in the summer with Rob Pizzola and Johnny. And he was talking about, when you're looking at handicappers, the key thing to think about is, where does their edge come from? What is the edge? And a lot of people can't define that. And when you think about just the volume of what happens in November with college basketball, put yourself in the bookmaker's position. We saw Jeff Benson from Circa, one of the more respected sports books in the world, come out yesterday. He said they're having the meeting this week to discuss their plans with college basketball. There's been 14 people at Right Angle Sports for 3 weeks now already doing full prep on all the teams and all the games. Everyone's got their region. Everybody covers the teams. There's daily calls that they're doing. There's the internal system where all the information is submitted. That's the ticker's going crazy each and every day. And so when you think about where the edge comes from, you have sports folks that have to deal. We all seen the Sports Equinox tweets. They're dealing with NFL. They're dealing with college football. They're dealing with NBA. They're dealing with NHL. They're dealing with MLB. And then here you have the team at Right Angle Sports. There's 14 people working around the clock on just college basketball. And so that is where the edge comes from for Right Angle Sports. And you look back at the November success, that is why it has been so high. And I know I'm selling pretty aggressively here, but I'm telling you, if you're looking at November and you're a bettor and you're trying to think of, what do I want to bet that has an edge? Yes, we're talking about NFL and we're talking about these games. Everybody is. But on the side, there's all of these guys behind the scenes working on college basketball nonstop. And that's why they have the winning track record they have had for the last 2 decades. And so if this is something that you can make work, you're not going to find a better edge in November than what you're getting with Right Angle Sports for college basketball. And so now we have both options available. raspicks.com/order. It begins on Monday. We will have the free release show, but I could not recommend the service more in November for anybody who wants to consider it. So definitely go over and check that out. raspicks.com/order. You can get the starter service or the flagship. Things you definitely need to get on, as it starts Monday morning at 7 a.m. Pacific will be the first release. With all that said, let's get to the NFL card for this week. It all starts off Thursday Night Football. Tennessee Titans on the road at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Pittsburgh, a 2.5-point favorite, -120. This was 3 yesterday. And it's interesting because I think if this is a game where you got Mitch Trubisky starting and healthy, I think it would have held at 3. When we think about the look ahead, it was 3.5 for the Steelers. Reopened on the other side after Tennessee gets the win. Pittsburgh comes out and has the Pickett issue, struggles again. And I was really intrigued. I was like, I like Pittsburgh in this spot with Trubisky. I was like, this is a spot where the offense, I know it's been struggling, but they're going to be forced to pass it against this Titans defense. This Titans defense has made some other not great quarterbacks look really, really good. You get Trubisky in there. I think that this could really work. And then Kenny Pickett, who's just insistent. He did it earlier this season, too, in the Baltimore game. Ripped up his ankle in Houston. Everybody thought he was going to be out multiple weeks. He comes back, and Pittsburgh's like, we're going to play him. And he ends up going and playing Baltimore. He had one big completion to Pickens. Otherwise, it was ugly all game long. And now it's a short week, and he's insisting on doing this again. And the Steelers coaching staff is going to let him do it again. And so that's a bit frustrating to me. I wanted to bet against Will Levis in this spot because it's quite simple. You have a rookie quarterback who just came off a start against Atlanta, which was very misleading. Now going on the road on a short week to Pittsburgh to play a defense that is just one that historically can pose problems for these types of quarterbacks. And this situation just lends itself so well to a potential Steelers win. And where I struggle with this is because what interests me most about going against Levis was everybody's talking about 4 touchdowns. Everybody's talking about how different it looked for Tennessee and the big plays that were never there with Tannehill. Everyone loves to just get excited about these rookie quarterbacks. When you look at what Levis did, the Titans had a 29% passing success rate. There was no sustained offense at all in that game. It was all big plays. It was all shots downfield. He made some great throws. I'm not taking that away from him. I'm not trying to detract from that. But it just wasn't what I think is going to be this immediate turnaround. And as we've seen with rookies time and time again, who get that start out of nowhere, have a big game, now they're on film, now there's tape on them. It just never quite looks as good the next week, especially on a short week like this on Thursday Night Football. That's a really tough turnaround all the way together. There is a bit of a break with Minkah Fitzpatrick going to miss, but the Steelers could very well get Hayward back in the middle of the defensive line. So what looks like it could have potentially been like a big Henry game or a big Spears game against the Steelers' run defense that struggled. If they get Hayward back, that's a pretty big boost to that interior on that defensive line. So that's a name you have to watch later today if he's ruled in. That would be a big boost for the Steelers defense up front. But I like Pittsburgh here, but at 2.5, where it stands with Pickett, it's a bit of a tough number to trust when you're getting him. If it was Trubisky, I think this is an easy decision on Pittsburgh. But with Pickett at less than 100%, I'm just worried we see a repeat of what happens with that Steelers game. Sam Reed says QB prop unders. Here's the thing with this specifically. So the Titans, now that they have Tart back in the interior of their defensive line, this has always been a pass funnel defense. And with him back, looking a lot better against the run, I think that this is a spot where they can potentially contain the run for the Steelers, and Pittsburgh has to pass a little more. Again, you have Pickett with the rib injury. So that's kind of a hard thing to judge. If it was Trubisky, I would want Trubisky yards over. Now that it's Pickett, I'm a little bit hesitant. On the other side, too, like I mentioned, if Hayward is back, I think the Titans' run game struggles a little bit, and you're probably going to have Levis, who's priced around like 202.5, I think was his latest number. As boomer bust as he was against Atlanta, which is a very good defense, you might see him forced to throw a little bit more. And I'm not trying to advocate necessarily a case for the over. I just think that both teams and their defenses stop the run a lot better than they do stop the pass, especially with Minkah missing for Pittsburgh as well. And so that was kind of my takeaway on this one. Would have loved to get in on Pittsburgh, but that Pickett news was just really unfortunate. I don't think that he's better at less than 100% than Trubisky is, and it's the second time we're going to have to see it. James says the Tennessee O-line has to hold up. Steelers secondary has been a little bit soft. Will definitely be softer without Minkah back there as well. Garrett Stone says Johnson props interesting. It's really tricky to gauge the Steelers and whether or not it's going to be Pickens getting kind of man outside, or if it's going to be Johnson forced to use as route running. We saw last week that really flipped, but the week prior, it was the opposite, where one opened up the other. And that's something that Tomlin's really talked about too. So that's kind of a tricky situation to navigate as a whole. Let's get to Sunday. Kansas City Chiefs, Miami Dolphins in Germany, 6:30 a.m. kickoff. This is going to be a very fun one. Dolphins look like they're getting offensive line help. Armstead back at practice. This was kind of, again, Miami got a really good performance last week against New England, what could have very well been a letdown spot for them. But now it looks like they're going to get Armstead back. It looks like both key guys in the secondary, Ramsey and Howard, are both going to be good to go. It's just kind of the Dolphins getting healthier. And we're at this point now with Miami where their defense has not been great all season long. It's performed when it's needed to, but in these step-up games, it's struggled. And you're just kind of waiting for Fangio to sort it out and this Dolphins defense to sort of click. And when it does, this becomes a really scary team all the way around. I don't think it's quite there yet. I think we saw a big step taken last week with Ramsey back into it. This could be the week where it shows up. Might have to wait a little bit, but this is a defense to really watch for Miami as it trends up. And when you pair that great defense that's coming with the offense and the way that it's been operating, especially once you get offensive line help back, that's going to look really, really good. The Chiefs are sitting as 2-point favorites. 1.5 just showed up at Circa. So for the first time all week, we're seeing Miami money come into the market. This was really holding steady. What surprised me a little bit about the opener was the Chiefs played probably as bad of a game as we have seen from Kansas City since the Titans game a couple years ago, the 28 or 27-3 game where Mahomes and Kansas City just completely no-showed. And there was no break in the price whatsoever. This opened right where the expectation was for the number to open. And so it's rare that you see a team come off a performance like that, and you have Miami on the other side get the win against New England where there wasn't any sort of discount or there wasn't any sort of drop. And I thought that stood out a little bit to me, and we're starting to now see that come in just a little bit. When I look at this matchup overall, and I think about where the Dolphins struggled against the Eagles and where the Dolphins struggled against the Bills, I think the Chiefs can do exactly what those two defenses did in a pretty effective way and in a very similar fashion. You think about Kansas City, their strength all season has been their defense, and they're able to generate pressure up front. They're able to contain the run, and then they're able to make things work with man on the back end within their secondary with their young corners. And Steve Spagnuolo, really, he's been one of the best big game defensive coordinators in the last number of seasons within the NFL. And I really think that he can replicate what both the Bills and the Eagles were able to do. And if the Chiefs can get a little bit of pressure, even if the Dolphins' offensive line gets a little bit healthier, we've really seen Tua struggle when pressured and forced to hold on to the ball for more than 2.5 seconds. When he's getting it out quickly and it's out of his hand and he's moving the offense, Miami's deadly. But I really think that the Chiefs can play a defensive style that forces them to hold it that extra half second and really sort of slow down this Dolphins offense a little bit. The big question is, though, and sort of the big unknown is, what are you getting from this Chiefs offense? We saw them, again, just really struggle. Maybe you can point to the look-ahead spot. Maybe you can point to the cold weather. Maybe you can point to Mahomes and the flu, right? There's all these excuses that always pile up for the Chiefs when they have a bad game like that. But it's really a question of where is this Dolphins defense at? And it's kind of the big unknown for me that makes me a little bit hesitant all the way around. And so as much as I like Kansas City, I would have liked to have a bit more of a bump. But I don't think I could play the Dolphins in this spot at this price. Would have to only look the way of the Chiefs, just betting on that defense. And I just wonder if we get a little bit more of a price break and see if this trends towards a pick 'em. David Rosansky says Dolphins seem to struggle against good teams and beat up on bad teams. I think that that's something that is really making the rounds, but it's kind of just been the schedule so far and how it's gone. They played, again, two very sort of specific types of defenses in the Eagles and the Bills. You maybe give them a bit of break against the Eagles because of all the O-line injuries, but I just really think that the Chiefs are going to be able to do what both of those defenses did well. And it's really kind of been a matchup thing all the way together. Yesterday on the live stream, Matt was talking about how the Dolphins very sort of sensitive to the matchups that they're playing. And he was kind of more so down on the Dolphins than he was looking at them as one that can sort of continue what they've put up so far this season. Matthew says Dolphins traveling earlier in the week is very important. Can't get out of my mind how the Eagles and Bills both dealt with the Dolphins already this season. KC bounced back after the Denver no-show. I don't know if there's enough sort of these situations where the teams leave immediately after. The easiest one to look at was Baltimore, who followed the same travel schedule that Miami has followed this week, where they left immediately after the game on Sunday. I don't know how many teams have done that specifically to London. I feel like the Wednesday departure has been the most common, but I would be very interested to see numbers on that as well. Jay confirmed this as well. The Dolphins left on Sunday, and so they've been doing their whole week there as prep all the way together. Michael Berkowitz said, any thoughts on the under? There was a thought a couple weeks ago where Chiefs games probably shouldn't be lined in the 50s just based on how great their defense has been and how their offense has been less explosive than years past. And so we're definitely seeing that sentiment shared within the market so far this season. Miami is only good at home, says Josh. I don't fully agree with that too, and this would be a neutral game for both teams, so I'm not looking at that one way or the other. Let's get to the game everybody wants to talk about. Vikings on the road at the Atlanta Falcons. Atlanta out to a 5-point favorite at circa 4.5 everywhere else currently. Total in this game, 37. Most recent news, you have Taylor Heineke starting for Atlanta. You have Jaren Hall starting for Minnesota. There was money that came in on this on Monday, and it pushed it out to 5.5. At 5.5, all of the money came back on Minnesota and pushed this number back down. Even with the Jaren Hall news coming through, which was kind of anticipated Sunday night when this number hit, we still haven't really seen Atlanta burst through that 5.5-point ceiling. The reason being, one, you have a very short total, but two, the Falcons have done nothing all season to show that they are capable of winning, leading, or covering by any margin. And so when you're looking at this game, you're you're backing Atlanta if you think they're doing something they haven't shown all season. And maybe Heineke is enough to get you to that decision. Personally, I don't know if that is going to be the case for me. But how in the world can you be comfortable backing Jaren Hall? And some of the issues that I see here with Minnesota is let's look at this a couple different ways. If Hall is going to be forced to throw the football, he's throwing against an Atlanta Falcons secondary that's performed well the duration of the season. He's also throwing against a decent secondary in his first ever start without Justin Jefferson. He's also throwing against the secondary with TJ Hawkinson dealing with a kind of a Liz Frank injury. It's not fully being reported as 100% transparent from the Minnesota Vikings. And so I know that he's been performing well, but matched up against the secondary, that becomes difficult. Let's say the Vikings go the other way and they're like, okay, we're going to keep it on the ground. Atlanta's been a top run-stopping unit all season long. Minnesota scored their first rushing touchdown of the season last week in week 8. So the Vikings have no ground game at all. And so Kirk Cousins, as much as people want to pile on Kirk Cousins, has been the only thing that has been holding this team together. You now take him out of the equation. Your best wide receiver is gone. You've lost key pieces on the defense the last couple weeks. Where do the Vikings go here? And really, you're only looking at Minnesota in this spot if you're saying that, hey, I don't trust the Atlanta Falcons to win or cover by margin. This number is way too big. Jaren Hall will do enough to keep it close. That's the only real reason you have to argue Minnesota. You might point to Grady Jarrett, defensive lineman for the Falcons, being ruled out, but like, what is he worth at this point? And so, boy, like, there's no way that you could be comfortable laying Atlanta at this number, but how in the world do you get comfortable backing Jaren Hall? Something interesting from the prop side. Drake London was just reported about half an hour ago dealing with a groin injury, groin or hamstring, one of the two. Last week, Drake London's snap count fell off a cliff. And you also saw wide receivers 2 and 3 fall off a cliff. Why was this happening? Van Jefferson saw a spike in his snap share. And so it seems like Atlanta really trying to work Van Jefferson into the fold. If London's less than 100% and Heineke steps in, you're probably going to see Van Jefferson get a lot of attention from the passing game against this Minnesota Vikings secondary. So keep an eye on that one, as there's a bit of a role change going on throughout the Atlanta Falcons offense. Let's move to the Seahawks on the road at the Baltimore Ravens. Baltimore, a 5.5-point favorite. Total in this game, 43.5. Missed a couple questions quickly. Tony, we'll get to the Survivor one later. Ask me that one at the end. Garrett Stone says Addison unders. Everything for Minnesota is going to be so short. Let's see how low those open all the way together. How do you grade Dobbs to the Vikings? I think they have to see what they have with Hall after taking him. Dobbs was semi-serviceable in Arizona, but no matter what you want to say about Cousins, both are a big downgrade to what the Vikings have right now. All right, Seahawks Ravens. Baltimore last week, to me, was a good team that won in a bad fashion on just an off game. And that's something you see really great football teams do. Baltimore couldn't get anything going through the air. Lamar had an off game. Ravens still made it work. And I think that that's a really telling sign of things to come. On the other side, Geno Smith got very fortunate with how that game finished to get the Seahawks to win. We've been talking about the Seahawks defense the last couple of weeks, how the front seven is improving. They now add Williams. Did they need it? Probably not. He makes the team better, though, regardless, putting him on that defensive line. This is a good Seattle defensive front. The secondary is healthy. They're quietly playing really well, too. However, you start to look back at the last couple of weeks for the Seahawks, hasn't really been a big test that they've had to go through. And now you have them going on the road across the country to play Baltimore off of an off game. And it's probably a spot where Baltimore is going to need to throw and need to push the ball through the air. And I think we see Lamar bounce back in a pretty big way. And I wonder if we see Seattle maybe continue to struggle a little bit on offense as they try to figure out this ground game. You have Kenneth Walker, who's not 100%. You have Zach Charbonnet, who comes in, who Pete Carroll's kind of reinforcing as needing to get more touches, needing to get more time on the field. And he took away a lot from Walker last week. But it's 2 weeks in a row for Walker where his stat line really inflated by a big run that he got early. And after that, that run game production has not been there. So it's kind of really been put on Geno's shoulders. Last week, we saw what happens when Geno was forced to throw against a lot of man coverage. The Ravens in seasons past would have fit that same mold. However, this year, they've been right around a 50-50 split in terms of usage percentage of those formations. That's not saying they're using them at those specific rates, but when you look at their utilization of zone and their utilization of man, they're right around 50% within the league in terms of usage rate. So you're not getting a specific defensive style standing out from the Ravens in coverage like you were last week, where you could point at the Browns and say why that was going to be a bad matchup for Geno. The Ravens could certainly shift into that. And if they do, I think we see Geno struggle again. But I think that this is a spot where the Ravens offense looks a lot better throwing the football than what they did against Arizona. That was just such a weird scheduling spot and just like a weird game all around that the Ravens, I thought, navigated really, really well. So that's kind of my stance on that. No lean for me, or no interest in the side of the total at the current price. We've got some more coming later in the show that have my interest, but so far it's been a tough one. Bryce Miller brings up a great point. 200 people on the stream, 40 likes. Hit the thumbs up button if you're finding value within the stream. I think that Falcons note with Van Jefferson is worth a thumbs up for those of you who like to play props. If you'd like to subscribe to the channel too, if you're enjoying the content, please do so as well. The button's right below. You're in the YouTube app chatting already. Let's get those numbers up too, especially with college basketball coming back on Monday and those free picks ahead. So give it a thumbs up if you're watching already. Nat H says, I took the Ravens at -4. I'm expecting a bounce back. Lamar MVP tickets trending. They're trending indeed. No question about that. Ravens teaser leg, Joseph. No, I would not be teasing the Ravens down at this number. Let's keep it going. Arizona Cardinals on the road at the Cleveland Browns. This is kind of the week of frustration that continues for me. The Browns right now are an 8-point favorite. Total in this game, a very low 37.5. I really was hoping that Kyler Murray would get forced back into this spot and we would see this number come down below the 7, because I would have loved to bet on the Cleveland Browns defense at home against Murray making his first start off injury in the new offensive system with Petzing, a massive change from what he was dealing with the last couple years with a different offensive scheme and style and play caller all the way around. That would have been just an awesome spot. But the Cardinals wisely said, we're not going to put Murray back in this situation. We're going to wait for next week when we're going to end up starting him at home against the Atlanta Falcons. Makes sense to me. They shipped Josh Dobbs away, and now you have Clayton Tune starting for the Arizona Cardinals. And so Arizona has this interesting kind of story, conspiracy, what have you, around them, where you have head coach Jonathan Gannon doing enough to show that he is deserving of what he was paid in the head coaching role, but also doing enough or lack thereof to try to get the Cardinals into the number 1 pick for next season within the draft, which brings in sort of trade implications. There's a lot of sort of moving pieces within this. I'm not one to put on the tinfoil hat and be like, hey, I'm buying into this. But you kind of look at this game all the way together, and it's basically a throwaway game for the Cardinals, who are just trotting Clayton Tune out into an impossible situation on the road against the league's best defense. What is the expectation here for Arizona? This is going to be a train wreck for the Cardinals. And so what carries on the frustration with the week is you're like, all right, we're going to bet against this, right? Like, this isn't easy. Well, you got to bet Cleveland here. And then you're like, how in the world can you be comfortable backing PJ Walker laying 8 points at home? 8 points against anybody. Doesn't matter where the game is. I mean, PJ Walker has shown nothing. Never mind through his career. Never mind through this season. It's like you're really betting on a defense to win you this game by margin. We talked about Atlanta. Atlanta's a team with all the pieces in place. You can argue quarterback. Now you have Heineke. Everybody's happy, right? And the argument with Atlanta, which the market has like firmly gone against, with Jaren Hall, who is arguably worse than Clayton Tune, right? We're at 5.5, and the market's like, no way, you can't lay that. And now we're at 8 here in this game in basically the same situation. And you're going to be comfortable laying this number with the Browns? Like, boy, I don't know. Browns in the teaser leg? Absolutely. Sign me up. If you can find a price that makes it worthwhile, teaser's becoming very difficult to bet anywhere. James nailed it right. Can't lay the 8. This is a game where you could only absolutely look at Cleveland. I see no upside in backing Arizona, given the situation and what they're doing whatsoever. There's just no way that can happen. The question is, are you comfortable laying the margin? If you're comfortable laying margin, you have two very good bets in Atlanta and Cleveland this week. I personally am not with these quarterbacks that they are trotting out there. But if you're looking at this in a teaser, absolutely agree with you on the Cleveland Browns in this spot against the Cardinals. Let's continue on with the frustration week that is week number 9 with the Rams on the road at the Green Bay Packers. It hasn't been official yet. I think anybody who's following it can see that Matthew Stafford is not going to start. They're not going to be at the media at 9:50 a.m., so it wouldn't have changed since we went live on the stream. But this is probably, I'm comfortable to say that it's going to be a ripping game for the Rams, and we're not going to see Stafford out there. I think Stafford will come back after the bye, dealing with a lot of those injuries. This was 1.5 in favor of the Rams before that came out, and the Packers have just been blasted. They are now out to 3 minus 120. And again, this just fits the mold of all of these games, right? You're looking at a Packers offense that has sustained nothing over the course of the year, is struggling. Last week had dozens of drops. Jordan Love incredibly inaccurate. Matt LaFleur struggling to do anything from a scripting perspective, struggling to make any in-game adjustments. It's been a disaster. You're looking at the Rams. Now it's a bit of an equal level disaster, a team that we've identified as being overrated here the last couple of weeks, off a blowout against the Cowboys, and they're coming off of that performance. And what are you expecting now with Rippon coming in to start and a defense that is falling off week after week after week, right? And so it comes down to the question of who you have, in the same manner as you had with the Falcons, in the same manner as you had with the Browns, a offense that is struggling, but still is healthy, not missing major pieces, facing a backup quarterback coming in on the road. But now you have to force yourself to back that much better team that hasn't shown any ability to win or cover by margin to now win and cover by more than a field goal at home. And the game just, to me, starts to feel a little bit untouchable in that regard. Initially, really like Green Bay at less than a field goal, but now that you're sitting at 3 minus 20, you almost have to look the other way and go with the Rams at this price just based on what the Packers have gone through. But it's another game that, as much as you'd like to, it's just a really sort of near impossible job trying to pull the trigger and hit submit on these home favorites. Buccaneers on the road at the Houston Texans. This is a very fun one. We finally don't have any sort of messes and hurdles to try and navigate around or get through. We have the Texans at home, 3 even money, plus 105 at Chris, 2.5 minus 15 at Pinnacle, and a couple offshores. Total in this game is 40. We've been against the Buccaneers the last couple weeks here on the show. I would like to be against them again this week, and I would say that I like Houston in this game. My hesitation in saying that is, what are we going to get from the offensive play calling perspective? The reason that I like Houston in this spot is the idea that we might see Bobby Slowick adjust and go to throwing the football more. When we have seen early down run rates, something we've criticized the Buccaneers about for weeks, the Houston Texans quickly becoming one of the biggest early down running teams in the NFL. Last week, they arguably early down runned themselves out of a victory against Carolina. Stroud looked very good passing the football, but Slowick was hammering on running the ball, which he's done at the podium the last several weeks, talking about Dameon Pierce, talking about Singletary. Pierce has really struggled in a new zone running scheme. Hasn't been the same running back we saw a year ago. We're seeing Singletary kind of emerge out of the backfield, start to get more touches. There's a resemblance there. But now that's the Texans talking about using Pierce as more of a receiving option out of the backfield. When you think about how the Buccaneers play defense, top 3 unit defending the run, below average defending the pass. This, by every right, should be logically a big game for CJ Stroud back at home, clear of the bye. All of his wide receivers are healthy. This should be a massive game for Stroud. The question is, will Slowick let Stroud throw as much as he should? That's That's full straight through the extent of the handicap of what you're going to see. On the other side, I don't love what you're seeing from Baker Mayfield. We all know my thoughts on Dave Canales. I don't like his play calling. I don't like his obsession with the early down run. Against Buffalo, forced into throwing it a lot more than what we've seen in weeks past, and he kind of stuck with it. But there was nothing sustained from this offense. They had a couple big third down plays, was much worse conversion rate, but they were held together by a couple of those big completions. But it was a struggle for them all game to move it across midfield. And now you have Mayfield against DeMeco Ryans. This feels like just a bad matchup for the Buccaneers offense. And like we say, Baker finds a way to lose. DeMeco Ryans' defensive unit is a problem. I agree with that for sure. I think that this is going to be a tough matchup all the way around. So I like Houston at home, but you have this sort of underlying factor that you may see these early down plays wasted. If they go to Stroud, I think Houston can cover. If they end up getting stuck on the ground again for another week, running into their Buccaneers defensive front, that's going to be a big problem. So keep an eye on that as you're looking through this game and thinking about it as you get to Sunday. Washington Commanders on the road at the New England Patriots. Pats are out to 3.5-point favorites. Total in this game, 40.5 from the service. For those of you who are on the 3 for 35, for those of you who are NFL season subs, you would have got New England earlier in the week at a much bigger number. Anticipation there was that there was going to be trades from Washington, which we saw yesterday with Young and Sweat being traded. There was also a big break for the Patriots offense, who has played the toughest schedule of opposing defenses through 8 weeks, now facing a Commanders secondary that makes every quarterback they face look a lot better than what they actually are. But my big take on the Commanders was this is a secondary that's doing nothing all year. The front seven has been holding the defense together. Now you lose 2 key pieces from that defensive front seven. What does Washington have left on defense? There's not a lot there anymore when you look through the depth chart. And so I think as bad as the Patriots offense has looked at times, this is a spot where New England is going to be able to move the football, going to be able to score. At 3.5, much less interested than I was earlier in the week. That's why there you have the benefit of the Right Angle Sports Service. When you have something like this, it definitely really stands out. And so that was the take on this game. From a prop perspective, something to consider with Washington is they quietly made some shifts on their offensive line. And what that led to last week against the Philadelphia Eagles, a very good pass rush, was the ball coming out of Sam Howell's hand a lot quicker, a lot more short passes, a lot more condensed routes. It wasn't Howell on big dropbacks. It wasn't Howell holding onto the ball in the pocket, looking deep downfield. It was a lot quicker throws. And so from a prop perspective, with that continuing to happen, you're going to see that change this Washington offense a little bit. And I think those changes on the offensive line are ones you have to circle as you look to some of those prices. It's maybe not fully reflected within this game, but I do think we'll see the Washington offense, which has been playing very quickly from a pace perspective, from a pass rate over expectation perspective. I think you're going to see that change with kind of the depth of target come in a little bit. You're going to see quicker passes, and you're going to see the offensive line that's allowed the league-leading sack rate so far improve a little bit for Washington. So that's going to change the Commanders up just a little bit, something to keep an eye on. But I do think this is going to be a big game for Mac Jones against this secondary. Rich, what are your thoughts on buying points on the key numbers? Perfect example, Pats minus 3.5, 105. Is it worth to buy down to 3 at 125? In NFL, almost always the answer is no, because almost every sports book is able to price this correctly. If you're looking for like specific ARB spots, or just because the market's kind of in a bit of a straddle where you're trying to find something specifically with some alternates that may be mispriced, there are calculators that will give you a much better answer on that specifically than I ever could. But if you're looking at this and saying that, well, I see 3.5 minus 05, I'd rather get it down to 3 just to be on the same side as you guys. First off, we were better than 3, so you wouldn't be, but you're paying the price that it actually is, plus the vig on top of it, to not get anything better, despite having like the mental comfort that you feel like you're getting a better price. It doesn't end up that way. Places are able to price this correctly. So I would stick away from doing that if you think that that's a way that you can look into it too. So stay away from those for sure on that one. James says if you're able to get 3 minus 15, sure. Another thing you can look at in this sort of environment, depending where you live, there's so many sports books now. You can usually just shop around and find a better number than what you're looking at most times when these games are straddled around the key anyway. Let's keep on going here. Keep the questions coming in, guys. If you got the thumbs up down below, if you haven't, if you've joined already and you haven't done it yet, that button is down below. Let's see if we can get over 400. Let's see if we can break the view count as well. Last week, 5.8K viewers. Let's see if we can get to 6,000 this week with 400 likes and a bunch of comments after within the video between now and Sunday. So if you have a second, hit that thumbs up. Bears on the road at the Saints. New Orleans, a 7.5-point favorite, minus 105. First of the week that there's clarity on. Bears plus 7.5. Look that I'd be willing to take. You're going to get Bajan again for this Bears offense. It's ugly, but you got to do it. I think that he's able to do enough against this Saints offense that was inflated and made to look a lot better than it is against the Colts defense that makes everybody league-wide look a whole lot better than it is too. That Colts secondary can make a case that it's the worst in the NFL, can make a case that that scheme is the worst in the NFL. And the Saints exploited that. Don't get me wrong. Derek Carr, weekly meetings, he was taking ownership. He had the FaceTime calls with all the skill guys. It looked a lot better for the Saints than what we saw against Jacksonville. However, there's still underlying issues within the Saints offense that I think absolutely have to stand out. And so I'm not just ready to throw those away and say they're all fixed because the Saints looked really good against the Colts defense that makes everybody look really, really good. The Bears got beat up badly against the Chargers. That was quite anticipated. Second game for Bajan coming in. You kind of see that coming. But I do think in this spot, a Saints team that, again, we're talking about teams all week here, laying big numbers, struggling to cover by margin. I think there's far fewer questions with the Bears than what you're getting with the Vikings, what you're getting with the Cardinals, what you're getting with the Rams. And that would make me comfortable enough to take the points here north of the touchdown. So Chicago plus 7.5, I think an interesting bet to make this week. I also think the Bears with their secondary, not trading Johnson, he's kind of forced into a position where now he's playing with something to come at the end of the season. If he wants to get out of there, kind of becomes a bit of a showcase for him. He's been great when he's been on the field. I think that this Bears secondary can look decent against this Saints team that really, if they're forced into this check down mode, the Carr is, the Bears do that from this defensive scheme, which Eberflus absolutely can implement and put on the field. That can kind of condense the game quite a bit too. And so it's ugly, but I would look at the Bears in this spot at north of a touchdown. Paul Enzo's trying to get me to pull up one of these ridiculous revenge game ones. I'll pull up the Jimmy Graham one, but that's he leaves some great ones in the chat for those of you that are following. Tim's up. Any time frame for Fields? I think the next game after this one, Fields could potentially be back for the Bears, if I'm counting right, is what the expectation there would be. Matthew says Saints in a teaser for me. Could see it. I think the Bears surprise this week. I like Chicago in this one. Colts on the road at the Carolina Panthers. Indy laying a field goal on the road at even money. Total in this game, 44. Have to continue on with the Panthers, getting the field goal at home in this one. Again, just like we talked about, the Colts defense, it makes every offense look a lot better. They also lost a key piece of their defensive front against the run to suspension a couple weeks ago. I think Carolina last week against Houston, again, it wasn't explosive. The stat sheet wasn't incredible. However, there was some signs of life from the team, right? You saw post-game, there's the big celebration. Thomas Brown gets the game ball. The team was bought in. You didn't see that from the Panthers offense in weeks prior. That just wasn't there. You also didn't see the early down pass rate that Thomas Brown put forth in that game plan against Houston. Again, it wasn't great, but you can't ignore that with Reich in a neutral game state, the Panthers were running on first down more than they were passing. Last week, that completely flipped. Nearly 60% early down pass rate for Carolina on dropbacks. And so I think I really believe that this Panthers offense is trending better than it is rated. And it's something that I would like to continue backing, especially, again, getting a field goal at home. You now have this kind of underlying storyline that I really like here. Paul Enzo brings it up. This is a good one, Paul Enzo. Frank Reich, revenge game. Obviously, Frank Reich was with the Colts for a long time. He is now with the Panthers, recently removed. When it comes to somebody who knows a Gus Bradley defense well, Frank Reich is at the top of that list. And so you think about the Colts defense, which is struggling and not doing anything and allowing opposing offenses to just have monster games. The Saints putting up 511 yards is just, it was unthinkable 12 days ago after we watched them against Jacksonville. Looked like a completely different team. I think we see that from the Panthers, and you have this inside knowledge of the defensive scheme, which is struggling from the head coach who is still invested within the offense. I think this is a game where the Panthers can show up and put up a decent number, and that can show through. So if you're getting the Panthers at the field goal, that is a bet along with the Bears that you can look at making as well. Austin Disney, target Chark at all with more fluidity expected. You would think that Chark eventually comes through. Thomas Brown loves his tight ends. We saw that come through as well last week. I'm surprised that Chark hasn't been more of an impact within this offense. Thielen's really been stealing all of the attention. Mingo's been getting in there a little bit too. I agree with you. Like, it's going to come through at some point. He's too fast not to have some sort of impact, but it hasn't been there so far this season. So I don't know, but I'm waiting for it for sure. I'm with you noticing that too. Michael Berkowitz, what do we think about the Panthers team total over? Sure, let's do it again. Jay Karma says the Colts defense should get exploited again. I absolutely think that they will in this matchup. Let's continue on with the fun ones before there's three good ones to finish. Giants on the road at the Raiders. Raiders clean house overnight. Recorded the podcast yesterday right around like midnight Eastern. I was like, early night to bed. This is great. Big show tomorrow. Doing the live stream. Had a good live stream today early. Got it. And the phone's dinging on the side table just about as I'm about to doze off. Was listening to the Hack It Out podcast they're doing with Mark Crossfield and stuff. I'm a big golf nut, as you can see in the background. So was dozing off listening to the pod, trying to sort of get my mind away from football for the first time this week. And then ding, 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 phone lines up. Raiders clear house. And so it's like, all right, I'm up. Here we go. And you're looking through it. And sure enough, everyone gets cleared out. We now have more sort of knowledge of what's going on. Aiden O'Connell will start for the Raiders. And so that's going to bring him in. QB's coach, Bo Hardigree, was promoted as the offensive coordinator. He was an Adam Gase assistant, which, if that's who ends up calling plays for the Raiders, well, let's see. But boy, when you look at this, right, you have the midseason reset. Everybody in that Raiders locker room wanted McDaniels out. And so immediately with this angle, which I just love to back, you're looking at this and you're like, you absolutely have to look at backing the Raiders. And I really have no case against that, especially now that this price has come down. We're seeing the Raiders at 1. It was higher at 2 or 2.5. I think the Raiders are the side you look at backing in this spot, laying 1. You're going to get just a much better effort from both sides of the football. There's no question about it. You see it every single time. The disastrous, sort of cancerous head coach is removed. Not only that, the coach is gone. The GM is gone. The offensive coordinator is gone. There were team meetings last week that the Raiders were holding, expressing frustration. That's probably going to come through to fruition. We saw in O'Connell's first start against the Chargers, Adams got a ton of touches. If the Raiders fall behind a little bit, Jacobs is going to get a ton of options in the receiving game. He's number 2 in targets when the Raiders are playing from behind. I think it's a big Adams game. I think Jacobs contributes as well through the air. I think O'Connell is going to be playing kind of with like a carefree optimism because now Jimmy has officially been benched. So it's not just a stand-in. It's O'Connell ready to let it fly. I think these quarterbacks that impress in the preseason and then come in to start are typically always kind of overvalued and overhyped. With O'Connell already having that start against the Chargers and this line moving down since the announcement, I think a lot of that maybe is kind of going the other way in terms of being priced in. So I don't think you're paying a premium. I think you're getting a much better Raiders team on both sides of the football that will have a much better effort. And I think that the Raiders team could kind of trend not to the Bisaccia level where they get into the playoffs, but I think for a couple of weeks here, you might really see things kind of show through. Yeah, here's a fun one. So with the coaching announcement, right, with how this comes through, um, you have Pierce going against the Giants. Pierce played with the Giants. He also won the Super Bowl with the Giants, and now he's the head coach in his head coaching debut against the Giants. What I can say about Pierce is when you go back and look at all of the articles online and what things were being said about him, he like every single football cliche that you can imagine: hard hat, lunch pail to work, blue collar, touch the grass, like everything. Like it can all be found around Pierce and what people say. That's not a good thing long term. That's not what you want. But like within this game, from a motivational perspective, it's kind of like a really, really good fit, I think. And so I think that shows through. And I think the Raiders are quite interesting to look at now, money line or spread, whatever you want to do. I think you get a big effort. Adams going nuclear for me and McRae. Yeah, it's going to be a big Davante Adams game, no question about that for sure. But I think we're probably going to see him open. I'd guess receptions is 6.5, heavily shaded over. I would not be shocked if you see a 7 on that number as well, potentially. I think it's going to be just a gross number that's really, really high. I think his yardage will be jacked way up too, but he's certainly going to be a big part of that one as well. So Raiders definitely the intriguing side within this one with all of the changes. I'm getting a lot of words out here in 56 minutes. Let's keep it going. 3 more games to go. We have the Cowboys on the road at the Eagles. 3 afternoon games in the afternoon slot. So you're going to be stuck between Colts Panthers, Giants Raiders, or Cowboys Eagles. The NFL schedulers did us no favors this week. This is going to be a fun game to watch, though. You have the Eagles laying 3 points, total 46. It's disappointing. I think the price is right. If anything, the Eagles are a touch short in this one, and I'd advocate for backing Philadelphia. The total, I think, is quite right as well. I think the Eagles' defensive front is going to perform very well against this Cowboys offensive line, which is still dealing with a couple of injury issues. I think the Cowboys sort of showed last week, benching their starters early in the fourth quarter with 13 minutes left, how much their focus is on this game. But I think we just see a coaching mismatch between McCarthy and what we're going to see from the Eagles, both coordinators, but also Sirianni at head coach, just how wide that gap is between what the Cowboys have as a coaching staff and what the Eagles have from a coaching staff. I don't know if we're going to see this number move a whole lot, but I really think we see that show through. I think Hurts not running is reflective of some of the knee issues that he is dealing with. However, throwing the football, we saw Smith get back involved within the offense. He had a big game last week. You have A.J. Brown going up against this Cowboys secondary, which is a plus matchup. You're also going to be able to target the Cowboys using anybody out of the slot for the Eagles too as well. And so I think this is a spot where you look to the Eagles, but I think we're relatively at the right price from the side and the total. A pretty boring breakdown all the way around, but I think that this is, as we saw last week, I highly recommend you watch it. Matthew Davidow, number 1 team in the NFL is the Philadelphia Eagles, and he was just adamant about that. And I think we see them in a big game here show why in a similar manner to what we saw them do against the Miami Dolphins a couple weeks ago on Sunday Night Football. Bills on the road at the Cincinnati Bengals. In my opinion, the most fun to talk about. We've seen the Bengals get as high as 3, and at 3, there was nothing but Bills money coming in. We're at 2.5 now with a total of 48.5. Here's what we know from the Bills offense. Last week, with the Dawson Knox injury, went to a lot of 3 wide receiver sets. We're running some empty sets as well with 5 wide receivers on the field. The Bills offense last week looked like the Bills offense looked a season ago. Stephon Diggs, before the game last week against the Buccaneers, came out and said how the team needs to go more up-tempo, need to go more huddle because it keeps defenses sort of giving you one look, and that presents big advantages for the Bills. Buffalo absolutely did that and torched the Buccaneers when they were doing so. Kevin Clark this week did an interview with Josh Allen, who reaffirmed all of that. And he said, when you're going no huddle, you're playing very fast. It's forcing the defenses to do one thing. It's allowing you as an offense not to have to overthink. It makes me a lot more comfortable, and it allows me to make better decisions without overthinking it. And he basically said he's all for everything that the Bills were doing last week offensively. So you now have this Bills team that's divided between what Dorsey wanted to do with the multiple tight ends, now not able to do that. He's going back to what he did a year ago. It's working out very well. We saw Josh Allen involved in the run game more last week, which is something he was not doing really for the first month and a half of the season. He was doing it more. He's absolutely going to do it more again this week too. And so when I think about the weakness of the Bengals on defense, it's 100% the safety position. I think now that we've seen Shakir emerge as a true sort of number 3 wide receiver, you have Dalton Kincaid. When you think about how a tight end position can be used to stress safeties, the Bills have a lot of good matchups on offense that they can use and exploit against the weakness of the Bengals, which has been defending the tight end, which has been having safeties come up and help. I think the Bills absolutely have that advantage. On the other side, it gets really interesting too, because you have a Bengals team where you can look at it two ways. You can throw out everything that happened pre-bye, right, which will lead you to having the Bengals probably as the 3rd or 4th highest rated team in the NFL. Or you can potentially be looking at them as saying that while relative to where they are, they're still potentially a little bit undervalued. I think the latter part loses a little bit of strength within the argument because we're seeing them priced essentially where they were against this Bills team last year as well. This total open 46.5. It's been nothing but over money. And I think that makes a lot of sense because the Bills' defensive injuries were all sort of disguised a little bit by who they've been playing the last couple of weeks. It's been Tyrod Taylor. It's been Mack, right? They haven't been tested whatsoever by an opposing quarterback on the other side. Baker Mayfield, not a guy that's going to test you. Now you get healthy Joe Burrow with healthy offensive weapons. Burrow under center, Burrow in the shotgun, can do both now that the leg injury is no longer an issue. He can absolutely test this Buffalo Bills secondary, which has got away the last couple of weeks with some massive injuries. The Bills add Rasul Douglas, who's been playing great for the Packers. I think that that's a nice pickup. What are you going to expect from him in his first game with the defense facing this Bengals offense that looks like it's going in the absolute right direction, especially off of last week? If the Bengals do what they did last week, they're going to be able to score comfortably on the Bills, just like they did in the playoff game, just like they were doing the regular season. This sets up really, really well all the way around. And so agree completely with the move on the over, with that number ticking up now to 48.5. I would agree with the Bills at 3, but I'm not super comfortable backing the Bengals at 2.5. So it's a stay away from me on the side. Unless it gets back to 3, I'd be intrigued with the Bills, but I think you see plenty of points in this one. I think Kincaid has a big game. I think Burrow has a big game as well. This is going to be a fun one to watch on Sunday Night Football. I think we're in for a very high-scoring game on Sunday night. The opposite could absolutely come to fruition on Monday Night Football as we get the Chargers on the road at my beloved Jets. The LA Chargers 3 minus 115 on the road. Boy, do you have two contrasting games here. You have the Chargers going across the country on the road to a game and a spot and a situation that just seems like they are primed to somehow, some way screw this up. I think the Jets defense and how Robert Saleh is talking about it is overrated relative to where they are ranked, which is obviously above average. You look at some of the underlying numbers and they're below average in that 18 to 20 mark. I get the impression that this plays out very similarly to what the Jets did against the Eagles in that game on Sunday, where it's just the ugly game where the Jets hang around, the defense does enough, they force the key turnovers, Herbert screws it up. We finally see the Chargers offense without Mike Williams really kind of bottom out, right? And it's just that ugly game that the Jets hang around in. And on the other side, what's intriguing to me is, although you have this sort of mass injury issue on the offensive line where there's 4 starters on IR, you're down to the 4th string center, you're signing Roger Saffold off the couch, who had a horrendous season last year. This could all end in complete disaster for the Jets, right? With that offensive line issue that they have up front. However, the Chargers are so bad at defending the run that there's potential for just a massive Breece Hall game in this spot, which, when you think back to like the Eagles game, it was just big chunk plays that happened at the right time, feeding off of the defense. And so I, it's a brutal spot, but I really wanted to like the Chargers, and I'm like, I disagree with some Jets sentiment earlier. And as the week goes on, I'm just getting in my mind that like this is the game that the Chargers just historically kind of botch and screw up. And I really think it looks a lot like the Eagles game for the Jets a couple of weeks ago. And so looking at this one at 3 even money plus or minus 105 for the Jets getting the field goal at home, have to go with the Jets at home getting the points in Monday Night Football. Again, I think the defense does enough. I think the Chargers make the mistakes when it matters. And I think the Jets offense behind Breece Hall, who has a big game, is able to do enough to keep this within the number, potentially get the Jets to win, which is just crazy that the Jets have the potential to be in the spot they are with a win in this game. And then you have the Bills, Bengals playing. You have the Chiefs, Dolphins playing. I mean, this is a massive game all the way around for the Jets, which is crazy to think after everything that they've gone through. But like the points at home on Monday Night Football. Fun one, guys. An hour and 5 minutes, right where we usually end. A couple more questions showing up in the chat. Matthew says, loved your interview with Matthew. He talks a lot. An interview to watch again for sure. Thanks, Minnie, for organizing it. That is in the RAS Picks video feed. You can see it. There's the link down below as well. You can get over and watch that. Gives you a lot to think about for sure in terms of modern sports betting all the way around. Antonio says, great info. Appreciate, Antonio, you stopping by. If you got just one piece of info that you found valuable that will help you make a bet this weekend, that's the goal of the live streams. If that was the case for you, there's a like button down below with the thumbs up. Would appreciate if you hit it. There's the subscribe button right here you can hit. You'll get notifications anytime videos go live. Would appreciate if you hit that as well. We will be back Monday morning with the first college basketball free pick release show of the season. And again, guys, I'm going to pull it up. The starter service for college basketball is now live for those of you who are in the $150 to $250 betting range. Something to consider. If you want to go for the flagship, that is available too. When it comes to college basketball in November, betting on the releases from Red Angle Sports are probably the best bets you're going to find anywhere all year round. And so I highly recommend, if it's something that you can make work, to really consider it. It starts Monday morning at 7 a.m. Pacific. It'll be a lot of volume. Will be very entertaining for those of you following. And the seasons past have shown it can be very profitable too. So I highly recommend getting over to raspicks.com/order and signing up for that too. Thank you, everybody, for stopping by for another live stream. Michael, we will end. Any thoughts on Survivor Pool picks this week? Still alive in circa. We are, as the Red Angle Sports team continues to truck along. Let's go with, wow, I have not thought about this at all this week. Browns at home in Survivor. Michael, that is what I would go with. Really think Arizona struggles there. Wouldn't lay the 8, would be very close to doing it, but I think the Browns are good. I hope that is what you were expecting. That's going to be a fun Survivor week all the way around as we see Dolphins money continues to come back into the market. Let's see how low that Chiefs numbers go. Maybe we'll get a good price with Kansas City. Thanks, everybody, for stopping by. Enjoy the rest of your week. If you have any questions between now and kickoff, leave them in the comments down below on the video. Thanks for stopping by for another live stream. We'll do these every Wednesday, 9:15 a.m. Pacific time, all season long. Enjoy your week. Enjoy the games coming up. Enjoy a fun week 9. We'll talk to you on Monday morning for the first college basketball release here on the RAS Picks YouTube channel.